The galaxy was silent, but in that silence, fear was growing. Across the void, a desperate signal raced from one star system to another. It carried no pride, no honor, no strength, only a plea for survival. An ancient species, once proud, was now on its knees, begging for help. The message was clear, simple, and full of despair. We are dying. The enemy cannot be stopped. If anyone can hear this, please answer. We beg you. Help us. The words echoed through space, repeated again and again. Most of the great empires heard the call, but none dared to answer. They all knew the name of the enemy, and the name was enough to freeze their hearts. For centuries, this enemy had crushed fleets, burned worlds, and erased civilizations. No one had ever stopped them. No one had even slowed them down. The alien empires that once stood tall now hid behind borders and silence. None wanted to face the terror that came like a storm. None wanted to sacrifice their fleets for someone else's doom. And so the call kept traveling, passing through countless systems. Every empire heard it, but every empire turned away. No one answered, no one even tried, until the signal reached Earth. Humanity was young compared to the ancient races of the galaxy. Their homeworld was known as a death world, a planet of storms, predators, and endless struggle. The aliens called them Deathworlders, beings forged by danger, beings that should not have survived, and yet they had. The signal reached human space, and unlike the others, the humans listened. In the high orbit of Earth, in the chambers of the United Human Council, the signal played. The room was silent as the voice of the dying aliens filled the air. Admirals, generals, leaders, all sat frozen for a moment. But humanity was not known for silence. They were known for action. They are asking for help, one general said, his voice steady. They are not our allies, another leader answered. Why should we bleed for them? But the council knew the truth. Humanity had faced death many times before. They had survived wars, plagues, disasters, and enemies stronger than themselves. If they ignored the call, they would be no better than the empires who hid in fear. And humanity never hid. The council voted. The decision was clear. The Armada would move. The Deathworlder Armada, humanity's greatest fleet, forged from steel, fire, and blood. It had been built for survival, but now it would fight for something greater. Not just survival, but the promise that no cry for help would go unanswered. The ships began to move, rising from shipyards, from orbital docks, from hidden bases in the void. Colossal vessels, bristling with weapons, engines burning bright. They were not beautiful like the sleek cruisers of alien empires. They were brutal, armored, and terrifying. Every ship carried the weight of Earth's history. Every ship carried the fury of humanity. The galaxy began to whisper. The signal had reached Earth, and Earth had answered. The Deathworlders were coming. In distant systems, alien rulers trembled. Some feared that the humans would fail. Others feared that they would succeed. For if humanity could do what no one else had done, then the balance of power in the galaxy would never be the same again. The dying species who had sent the call felt hope for the first time. They did not know these humans, but they felt something strange in their message. The humans had replied with only 4 words. Hold on, we're coming. As the Armada prepared, the soldiers aboard the ships stood ready. They were not gods. They were not immortal. They were men and women who had lived through hardship. Every one of them knew the risks. Every one of them understood that many would not return. But not one of them hesitated, because they were human, and humans did not run from fear. They ran into it. The enemy would soon learn this truth. The galaxy would soon remember it. And when the Deathworlder Armada moved into the dark void, the stars themselves seemed to tremble. For humanity had answered the call, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The alien world of Veyron had never seen such shadows in its skies. Civilians looked up from the streets, their faces pale as enormous shapes blocked the stars. It was not an eclipse, it was not a storm, it was the human armada. Ship after ship slid out of the void, each one larger, darker, and more terrible than the last. They came in silence, but their silence was more frightening than any war cry. The Veruni had called for help, but even they trembled at what had answered. The humans were different from every empire they had ever known. Their ships did not shine with decoration. They were not painted with bright banners. They were slabs of iron and steel, scarred, armored, built only for war. The largest ship entered orbit, its cannons the size of towers. Its engines burned so bright that the atmosphere screamed. The people whispered in fear, "Are these our saviors, or are they another doom?" But when the humans spoke, their words carried no pride, only resolve. "This is Admiral Kane of the United Human Armada." The voice thundered through the skies. "We heard your call. We will stand with you. Prepare your defenses. The enemy will not take this world while humanity draws breath." The aliens wept, some with hope, some with terror. They had wanted salvation, and instead, they had been given Deathworlders. In the great halls of other empires, the news spread like wildfire. The humans had arrived, the Deathworlders had answered. Some rulers shook their heads, certain the humans would be crushed like all the others. But others clenched their fists in fear, whispering, "If they survive this, none of us will ever be safe again." Inside the Armada, soldiers prepared. They checked weapons, locked armor, and stood ready for war. Their eyes burned with focus, but beneath that, there was something even stronger. They were not fighting for empire, not fighting for conquest. They were fighting because someone had asked for help, and no one else had come. On the command deck, Admiral Kane stared at the star maps. The enemy fleet markers were moving closer, a storm of red lights. His officers waited for his command, their faces calm but tense. He spoke only 5 words, and those words ran through the fleet like fire. "Deathworlders, today we stand." The fleet roared to life. Engines thundered, weapons charged. The Veruni skies shook as the Armada spread its wings. Children pointed in awe. Elders bowed in fear. For the humans were not an army. They were a force of nature. One alien officer whispered to another, "They look like monsters." The reply was quiet, but full of truth. "Yes, but they are monsters who stand with us." And that truth gave them courage. For the first time in centuries, someone had not turned away. For the first time, the enemy would face an opponent that did not know how to surrender. As the enemy fleet drew closer, the galaxy held its breath. The Deathworlders had arrived. The question was not whether they would fight. The question was what the galaxy would become once they had. The enemy fleet emerged from the void like a swarm of blades. Dark ships, sharp and endless, filling the stars until no light remained. For centuries, this fleet had crushed every opponent without mercy. They believed this battle would be no different. On the surface of Veyron, the alien civilians clung to each other. Eyes wide as the skies turned red with warnings and alarms. They had prayed for help, but now they feared they had only invited doom to arrive faster. Inside the command deck of the human flagship Resolute, Admiral Kane stood tall. The enemy ships outnumbered them 3-1. His officers glanced at the screens, their voices tense. "Sir, the fleet is moving to encircle us," one said. Another added, "Their formation is designed to break defenses quickly." Kane only nodded, his voice steady. "Good. Then let them try." Across the Armada, human soldiers prepared. Young men and women sat inside drop pods, weapons ready, armor sealed. They could hear the faint vibration of the engines. Each of them knew this could be their last battle. But no one backed away, no one begged for mercy. They were children of Earth, children of a death world. Fear was their oldest companion, and courage was their answer to it. From orbit, alien observers aboard a neutral station watched the humans. Their voices shook. "Look at their ships, they do not retreat." Another whispered. Every other empire would scatter at this sight. And then, in silence, they watched as the humans advanced. The Armada did not wait to be struck. Like predators, they surged forward, weapons blazing. The first volley lit up the void. Torpedoes screamed. Cannons thundered. Beams of fire tore through the black. Enemy shields shattered. Their ships cracked. It was the first time in centuries that the enemy had taken true damage. On the enemy flagship, commanders snarled in disbelief. These humans, they charge instead of running. They throw themselves into death without hesitation. Another hissed, "No, not without hesitation, with fury." The clash became chaos, ships exploding in every direction. The void turned into fire. Human ships were torn apart, but each loss was met with vengeance. If one vessel fell, two more surged forward to fill the gap. If one gun went silent, a dozen more answered with rage. The Veruni on the ground watched in awe as the skies became a storm. For the first time, they saw the enemy's advance halted. The impossible was happening before their eyes. The Deathworlders were not breaking. They were holding the line. Inside the Resolute, alarms screamed as shields flickered. "Admiral, we've lost the horizon and the ironclad," an officer cried. Kane's jaw tightened, grief flickering across his face. But his voice was firm. "Their sacrifice holds this line. We will not fail them." The battle dragged on, each minute a lifetime. Humans fought with everything they had. They did not fight clean. They did not fight elegant. They fought like survivors, using tricks, traps, and fury. Every move was designed to hurt the enemy, no matter the cost. At last, a strange silence spread across the enemy fleet. For the first time, their advance had slowed. For the first time, they had lost more ships than they expected. Their commanders looked at the data in disbelief. They should be broken, yet they fight harder. They should be dead, yet they rise again. On the ground, the Veruni people cried out with new voices. Not cries of despair, but cries of hope. They had seen the humans stand against the storm. They had seen Deathworlders fight, and, for the first time, they believed the enemy could be stopped. The first clash was not the end, but it was the beginning. The galaxy had watched, the enemy had felt fear, and the Deathworlders had shown the truth. They were not saviors dressed in glory. They were warriors born in hardship, and when they answered a call, the galaxy itself shook beneath their fury. The Battle of Veyron's skies raged without pause. For hours, the humans had stood against the storm, their ships burning, their numbers thinning. Every alien watching believed it was only a matter of time, that the humans would fall like all the others. But something strange began to happen. The enemy pressed harder, surrounding the human armada. They struck with perfect formations, blades of fire cutting into shields. And yet, each time they believed the humans cornered, the trap collapsed. Every time they thought victory was certain, humanity revealed another trick. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Kane studied the chaos. He was no stranger to desperation. Earth had taught him that survival was never clean. "Signal the hammerfall to break formation," he ordered. An officer gasped, "Sir, that will expose their flank." Kane's eyes burned. "Yes, expose it, and then let them chase." The enemy surged after the lone ship, certain of an easy kill. But when the hammerfall veered near the asteroid field, hidden mines detonated. Explosions ripped through the pursuing fleet, tearing their formation apart. Alien observers watching from orbit could only stare in shock. These humans, they planned to bleed, just to set a trap. In another corner of the battle, the Iron Dawn was crippled, engines dead, weapons failing. Instead of retreating, it turned itself into a weapon. The crew locked the ship on a collision course. The enemy laughed until the human vessel rammed into their largest cruiser. Both ships vanished in fire, and for the first time in centuries, the enemy screamed in rage. Human tactics were not elegant. They were not beautiful. They were brutal, desperate, and alive. Each move carried the will of survivors who had never known safety. And with every sacrifice, the tide shifted. On the ground, the Veruni people gathered in the plazas. They watched the skies where fire danced. They whispered to one another, they should be dead. Yet the humans still fought, still clawed, still endured. In the enemy flagship, confusion spread. They do not follow patterns, one commander hissed. They turn every weakness into a weapon, another growled. They fight as though death is nothing to them. And beneath their anger was something darker, fear. Admiral Kane's voice echoed across the fleet. Remember, every loss we take must cost them more. Make them bleed for every inch. Make them fear us. The Armada answered with fire. Even as ships fell, the enemy began to hesitate. The unstoppable storm was slowing. By the third hour, the impossible had become reality. The enemy fleet, so confident, so certain, was breaking formation. They had expected to crush prey. Instead, they had met predators. Every alien empire watching through secret channels felt their hearts race. The Deathworlders were not just fighting, they were winning. On Veyron's surface, children raised their voices in awe. Elders who had lost faith fell to their knees, whispering prayers of gratitude. The humans had turned despair into strength, and the galaxy had just witnessed a truth that would never be forgotten. The tide had turned, the enemy had learned, and humanity had shown that even in the jaws of defeat, they could bite back harder than anyone ever imagined. The skies of Veyron were filled with fire, but behind every burst of light, there were lives ending. For every enemy ship destroyed, a human vessel paid the price. The Armada fought like no fleet ever had, but survival demanded sacrifice. And humanity understood sacrifice better than any race in the galaxy. On the Resolute, Admiral Kane stood in silence as reports came in. The Hammerfall is gone. Ramming maneuver successful. An officer said, voice trembling. Another whispered, the Iron Dawn lost with all hands, but they took the cruiser with them. Kane closed his eyes for a moment, but he did not flinch. He carried the weight of every name, because that was the duty of command. In the crew quarters of the Vigilant, a young soldier sat with a datapad. Her armor was scarred, her hands shaking, but she smiled faintly as she recorded. If this message reaches home, tell my brother I kept my promise. I stood, I fought, I did not run. She looked at the stars outside the viewport, tears in her eyes. Then the alarm screamed, and she rose without hesitation, walking back into the fire. Alien allies watching from orbit wept at the sight. They had seen humans fight, but now they saw humans die. Not with fear, not with despair, but with defiance. Every death was not the end of hope. It was fuel for the living. For every ship lost, the survivors fought harder. For every soldier fallen, their comrades burned with rage. On the ground, the Veyron civilians gathered in shelters, listening to human transmissions. They heard voices that were calm, even in death. Keep firing, don't stop. Tell them Earth remembers. Make sure they know we stood. The aliens looked at one another, realizing the truth. The humans were not fighting only to win. They were fighting so no one else would stand alone again. But war is cruel, and the price grew heavier. Entire squadrons vanished, names wiped from the roster in a single breath. The Armada bled, and yet it did not falter. The enemy kept pressing, but for the first time in centuries, they bled as well. They had expected prey. Instead, they found predators willing to die with teeth still in their throats. Admiral Kane knew the cost was unbearable, but he also knew retreat was death for all. We hold here, he ordered, his voice sharp as steel. Every sacrifice buys another breath for this world, for this people, for the galaxy. His officers answered as one, for Earth, for Veyron, for humanity. Among the enemy fleet, commanders hissed in frustration. They throw lives away as if life means nothing, one growled. But another corrected him, voice uneasy. No, they do not throw lives away. They give them, they choose. And in that truth, even the enemy felt fear. Because how do you break a people who choose death freely, if it means protecting another? On the surface of Veyron, a child clutched her mother's hand. Through the bunker's thin walls, she could hear the sky rumble. "Are they winning?" she asked softly. Her mother looked at her, eyes full of tears, and whispered, "They're paying the price so that we can live." The Armada held. The price of war was written in fire and blood. But humanity did not retreat. Humanity did not surrender. Every loss became another stone in the wall they built with their bodies. And that wall held against the storm. The galaxy had seen victory before, but never like this. Never a victory built on sacrifice, so raw, so defiant, so human. And though the cost was beyond measure, the message was clear. When humanity answered a call, they gave everything, even their lives, even their future, even their last breath. And the galaxy trembled at the price they were willing to pay. The enemy fleet had never known hesitation. For centuries, they swept across the stars like a storm, certain of victory. But now, above Veron, they slowed, their perfect lines broken, their commands uncertain. For the first time, they faced Deathworlders. Inside the enemy flagship, commanders shouted over one another. "They should be gone by now," one hissed. "We have destroyed fleets twice this size without effort," another snarled. Yet the data on their screens told the same impossible truth. The humans were still standing, and worse, they were pushing back. On the Resolute, Admiral Kane leaned against the command table, his face pale, but his eyes steady. Reports of losses scrolled endlessly, but so did reports of enemy destruction. "Sir, the enemy advance is slowing," an officer said, voice trembling with awe. Kane nodded. "Then press harder, let them feel what it means to fight humanity." Across the galaxy, hidden in shadowed halls, alien rulers watched the battle through intercepted transmissions. The Corran, who had once mocked humanity as children of a cursed world, sat in silence. The Valtari, who had refused to help, now whispered, "If they can break the swarm, what will stop them from breaking us?" Every empire felt the same cold truth. The balance of power was shifting, and the center of that shift was Earth. On the surface of Veron, civilians poured into the plazas, their eyes fixed on the skies. They had expected to die, but now they saw enemy wreckage raining down. They saw human ships still burning, but still fighting. For the first time in living memory, the enemy was not unstoppable. For the first time, the galaxy's nightmare was bleeding. In the enemy fleet, silence grew heavy. A commander whispered what no one dared to admit. "They're not stronger than us. They're not greater in number, but they will not stop." And in that moment, they felt something new, fear. Human captains shouted over comms. "Hold the line. Every second we live is another second the galaxy sees them fall." The Armada roared with fire, ships battered, shields cracking, but still advancing. Even crippled vessels turned themselves into weapons, refusing to die quietly. Every act of defiance was a wound to the enemy. Every sacrifice a strike against the storm. From the perspective of the galaxy, the battle was no longer about one world. It was about a truth that echoed across the stars. Humanity had answered a call, and in answering, they had changed everything. The Veruni elders, who had believed their people doomed, now stood among their children and whispered, "Remember this day, remember the humans, for they have done what no empire dared." The children's eyes burned with hope, hope carved not from promises but from fire in the skies. By the battle's 5th hour, the enemy faltered. Ships broke formation, commanders hesitated, and fear spread through their ranks. They had faced countless foes before, but never one that bled and still kept fighting. Never one that turned pain into fury, loss into strength, despair into defiance. The galaxy trembled, not just from the fire of war, but from the realization that humanity had proven a truth every empire had tried to ignore. That Deathworlders could not be measured like others. That Earth's children were born from storms, and storms did not break. They only grew stronger. As the enemy began to retreat, Admiral Kane stood silent. He knew the battle was not yet over, but he also knew history had already changed. For the galaxy had seen, the galaxy had learned, and the galaxy would never forget the day it trembled before humanity. When the battle ended, the skies of Aeron were no longer black with ships. They were lit by wreckage, burning trails of broken vessels drifting through the void. The enemy had retreated, their swarm shattered, their confidence broken. For the first time in centuries, they had fled on the ground. The Veyruni stepped out of shelters into the light. They looked to the heavens and saw not death, but survival. They saw human ships still in orbit, scarred and smoking, yet unbowed. And tears fell freely, for their world still lived. Inside the Resolute, Admiral Kane stood surrounded by silence. The reports scrolled endlessly, names of ships gone, names of crews lost. His officers lowered their heads, grief heavy in their chests. But Kane's voice was steady. They gave their lives so that this world could breathe, so that hope could rise again. Let the galaxy remember their names. Across the Armada, soldiers sat in silence. Some stared at photos of family, some clutched tokens of home. They were alive, but they carried the weight of the fallen. And in their hearts, they knew the war was not over, but the message was clear. Humanity would never stand aside, not when the galaxy called. The Veyruni people gathered in their capital, their leaders speaking to the skies. To the humans, to the Deathworlders, we give our thanks. We will never forget. Children raised drawings of human ships, their small voices shouting the word heroes. And for the first time, the Veyruni believed their future might exist. Far away, in the shadowed courts of alien empires, rulers whispered in fear. The humans had done what none of them dared. They had not only survived, they had made the enemy bleed. If humanity could stand against the storm, what else could they do? Could they challenge empires? Could they rewrite the order of the stars? The galaxy had no answers, only trembling silence. Among the enemy fleet, commanders seethed with shame. They had tasted fear, they had known hesitation. And in the dark chambers of their councils, they whispered a new name with bitterness. Deathworlders. The word that once meant savages now carried another meaning. The ones who do not break. On Earth, the message arrived before dawn. Families gathered around screens, watching transmissions of the Armada. They saw the damage, the fires, the losses, but they also saw victory, and a wave of pride swept across the world. Their sons and daughters had stood against the galaxy's nightmare and endured. Admiral Kane looked out at the stars, his reflection faint on the glass. He knew the cost. He knew the future battles waiting beyond the horizon. But he also knew something greater. Humanity had shown the galaxy a truth carved into their very existence. They were born from a world that tried to kill them every day, and so they had learned not only to survive, but to fight for others who could not. The Armada turned its ships homeward, carrying the scars of victory. They were not triumphant, they were not unscarred, but they were victorious, and their return would echo across every world that had watched in silence. The galaxy would whisper the same truth in fear and awe. When humanity answers the call, the stars themselves tremble. And so a new era began. An era where Deathworlders walked among the stars. An era where no empire could ignore the will of Earth. An era written in sacrifice, in fire, and in mercy. For the Armada had proven what the galaxy had always feared, that humanity was not just another race. Humanity was a force,